Tuco Salamanca is hands down the most chaotic and unpredictable characters in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Because not only is he violent and completely unstable, but what he lacks in intelligence, he more than makes up for in unchecked power. Because no matter who's speaking to him, nobody ever says that he can't do something. Instead, they would just tell him a better option in the hopes that he would agree. And if you happen to be one of the lucky few that gets him to listen, well, you have something that only a handful of people on this planet has, and that's Tuco's respect. Because for him, that's not something that can be earned. You have to take it, which is why Walter had to nearly blow up a building to get it when his own henchman was beaten to a pulp just for assuming that he had it. And that's the difference. So in this video, we're diving into the real reason why respect matters to Tuco above all else. More than money, more than drugs. Well, maybe not drugs, but you get the point. And if you could leave a like on this video to support the channel, well, you too would have my respect. But let's go ahead and start from the moment that we canonically first meet Tuco, which is in Better Call Saul. And he's introduced to the series because of a big misunderstanding. Well, kinda. Because early on in the episode, Saul works together with two skateboarding scammers to stage a car accident in the hopes that he would get hired for legal services from a woman named Betsy Kettleman. And she also happens to be a scammer too, but we're not going to get into her personal life right now. But all you really need to know is the kind of car she drives, which is a brown 1998 station wagon. And the reason why this is so important is because coincidentally, the only other person who drives this car in the entire city is Tuco's abuelita. And when she's mistaken for Betsy Kettleman, the scheme doesn't exactly go according to plan. And after she hits one of the skateboarders, instead of doing the responsible thing like checking to see if they're okay or even calling an ambulance, she just takes off. But the skateboarders will follow her all the way to her house, and this is where Tuco comes in. And you would expect someone like him to have an introduction as badass as it was in Breaking Bad. Maybe somewhere surrounded by gang members, loud music, and a bunch of drugs. But instead, we get Tuco preparing food in the kitchen and even wearing an apron. But unlike Lalo's introduction with him basically doing the same thing, Tuco just looks out of place with an apron on, almost like he was forced to wear it by his abuelita. And this would give the impression to the skaters that he's not exactly a threat. But that would all change when they insult his abuelita to his face.
Crazy old biznatch, you ran over my brother.
And when he hears this, it's like he was just surprised that someone would openly disrespect him in his house. And for that, he knows exactly how he's going to take care of them. But not wanting to do anything violent in front of his abuelita, he calms her down by just telling her to go upstairs and watch TV while he deals with the two skaters. And this says something about Tuco's respect to his family. Because even though it's likely that his abuelita knows that the entire family is involved in the cartel business, I'm guessing as long as they don't bring those problems to the house, she pretends that none of it's happening. And that's why when we see him holding Saul at gunpoint, when she comes out of her room, he has the decency to hide the weapon behind him so she doesn't see it. And she also wouldn't see how Tuco dealt with the two skateboarders, because after knocking them out and tying them up inside the garage, from that moment on, they were as good as dead. But luckily for them, they had Saul Goodman, and while staring down the barrel of Tuco's gigantic gun, he managed to talk him down to the point where he was willing to let him and the skaters go. Because when it was all said and done, this was just a misunderstanding. But the second the skaters were able to speak, they just made things that much worse. And any goodwill that Saul built up with Tuco was gone in like 8 seconds. Because they basically said that the plan for hustling Tuco's abuelita was all Saul's idea. And this scene always frustrated me because it's like, guys, read the room. Saul is clearly there to help you, and the first second you get, you turn on him, which results in what happens next. Because now feeling like he was lied to and played for a fool, Tuco ends up bringing them all to the desert and was ready to kill them and leave them as food for the buzzards. But once again, Saul was able to talk his way out of a death sentence even with the threat of his finger being cut off. And with Nacho being the smart one in the group, he doesn't argue that Saul is innocent. Instead, he lets Tuco know that killing a lawyer could be bad for business. But to satisfy his need for violence, he tells him that the two skateboarders are fair game. And with this idea coming from someone that Tuco respects, he agrees and they let Saul go. And we would also see the first time that No-Dos tries to speak for Tuco, and he's immediately put in his place, and showing us that there is a hierarchy established with the gang, and No-Dos is someone whose opinion does not matter.
Stop helping.
And just as the skaters were about to be skinned alive, Saul puts his life on the line to save them. And while using everything that he learned in law school to mitigate the situation, he managed to negotiate Tuco just breaking their legs instead of killing them. And this highlights just how deep the idea of respect is for him, because that's not something that an apology can fix. For the Salamancas, this respect must be paid back in blood. And with all the hoops that Saul had to jump through just to get him down to breaking a leg, this makes me think that this must have happened at least one other time. Because even Lalo mentioned that Saul was lucky to walk out of there alive.
You know the Tuco I know? He would have skinned them alive and let the buzzards eat their eyeballs.
But the next time we see Tuco, we get a better understanding of how he operates when he meets Mike. And after hitting his car before going into a taco shop, Tuco tries to confront him as he's going to the register, but Mike purposely ignores him and keeps walking. And this would light a fuse for the quick-tempered Salamanca, because not only was his property damaged, but the person who did it isn't even acknowledging his presence. Which, in a way, threatens his entire sense of identity, because for someone who's supposed to be both feared and respected, having some random old man disregard him would just make him feel insecure. But with him being in a place of business, he would try to handle this civilly and confront Mike face to face. But when he's talking to him, it's like Mike is saying everything to make Tuco upset. Like when he tells him that he hit his car, and Mike acts clueless as to why Tuco's even talking to him.
You just hit my car. Dude, you're talking to me.
Then he flat out denies that he even hit Tuco's car and essentially calling him a liar. But when he starts to get pressed by both Tuco and Nacho, he would give a half-hearted apology before turning his back to pay for his food. And you can just feel Tuco getting angrier by the second because he's not being taken seriously. And at the same time, we see Mike purposely flashing hundreds of dollars in his face before paying for his food and giving Tuco a reason to want more than just an apology. And at this point, it's almost like Mike has completely forgotten about the interaction they were having about the car, and he just walks past both Tuco and Nacho like they were nobody. And similar to the skaters, he stands there confused that he's just being disrespected to his face again. But once they get outside, Tuco is basically at his breaking point, and after showing him the damage to his car, Mike tells him that he doesn't have money to cover the damages. But knowing that he's lying because he just seen hundreds of dollars in his hand, to gain some level of control over the situation, he demands his wallet. But with Mike not wanting to give it up, Tuco's reaction is to flash his gun and basically take it by force. Because for him, it's not even about the money anymore. It's his way of reminding himself that he's the one in charge. But even when he has the money and is being warned that the cops are coming, he still wants to lecture Mike on who he's dealing with to reinforce the fact that he is supposed to be respected. Which, again, shows how insecure Tuco is, because what more is there to explain in this situation? But I guess when he runs into the only person who doesn't fear him, he resorts to the only thing that he knows, which is irrational violence. But this would turn out to be his downfall, because when he tries to leave, Mike grabs a hold of him and he would refuse to let go. And I have to commend Mike on his reflexes, because when Tuco pulls out that cartoonishly large gun and points it at Mike, it's just slapped out of his hand like it's nothing. But then, almost with no hesitation, Tuco goes to his second option, his fist. And again, shout out to Mike who was able to take a beating like that and not only remain standing, but also find a way to trigger Tuco in front of the entire police force.
That all you got?
Get on the ground!
Now, it's one thing to have anger issues, but you pair that with drugs as well as a lifetime of lessons from the cartel, and you get Tuco Salamanca. And maybe if he didn't have one of those three traits, he would be a completely different character. But with him being raised by his uncle Hector, who was a cartel enforcer, he taught his nephews to rule with fear, because fear equals respect. So either way, he was always destined to be violent. But where literally everyone else had some form of restraint, Tuco wouldn't even know the meaning of the word. And personally, I feel the reason why he was so untamed is because he never faced consequences. Well, at least up until getting arrested, but even then, Hector paid off Mike to take a gun charge and turning a 5-year prison sentence to just 6 months. And before that, he killed people just for looking untrustworthy, which is just an unwinnable situation. And if you don't know about it, let me clue you in. So, during season 2 of Better Call Saul, Nacho tells Mike a story of one of their connects, a man named Dog Paulson. And one day, after buying from Dog, Tuco, thinking that he has some kind of sixth sense, will put on what he calls his lie detector. And this requires him to just stare at someone for minutes and come up with his own conclusion. And in this case, he thinks that Dog is supplying their competition. But does he have any proof of this? Of course not. He just has a feeling. And he acts on that feeling by casually using a shotgun to blow off Dog's head, with a piece of his skull even being lodged inside Nacho's shoulder. And the craziest part about this story is the fact that Tuco actually liked Dog and he felt bad about it afterwards. But in the moment, none of that mattered, because in his eyes, Dog disrespected him by just giving Tuco the impression that he was selling him out. And this obsession with respect would only get worse once Tuco's released from prison. And 6 months later, plus whatever time he got from stabbing someone while being locked up, Tuco was out running things in the Salamanca territory. And I also have to point out the fact that he is dressing in darker clothes, because unlike in Better Call Saul when his outfit choice was somewhat vibrant and showing us through colors that Tuco was still figuring himself out, in Breaking Bad we see how much he's grown with him opting to embody the classic drug dealer motif, from jewelry, tattoos, and of course, the clothes, with him often wearing a black leather jacket with some kind of long sleeve shirt underneath. And whether it's a casual black button down or just a rattlesnake pattern dress shirt, each one of his outfits are deliberate in showing off his status as a drug kingpin. Like when we first see him in Breaking Bad, he's sitting in a rundown office to give off that boss-like persona. And the very first thing that we see him doing is picking something out of his teeth with a knife. And less than a minute later, he's using that same knife to scoop up some meth and have Jesse snort off of it. And this was the moment that I believe that Tuco had zero respect for Jesse, because after he forced him to take a bump off the knife, he was just laughing at him, likely because he literally had him eating out the palm of his hand. But after Tuco tried the meth for himself, with the same knife by the way, he knew that he had to have it, but paying for it was never going to be an option for him. And that's why after being told the price, he just tells Jesse to get out of here and he'll get his money, eventually. But with this not being the deal that he agreed to, he let Skinny Pete know to try to mediate the situation between them. And all this would do is anger Tuco more, because with him being someone of status in the drug game, he doesn't need anyone to vouch for him. And the fact that Jesse turned his back to Tuco to speak to Skinny Pete, he took that as disrespect for him not being spoken to about the deal to his face. And in his mind, he was probably thinking, why are you talking to him about me, about our deal, when I'm right here? And honestly, in this situation, I'm on Tuco's side, because even though he was basically going to take the drugs regardless, Jesse could have at least spoken up for himself to the person who was trying to take it, and not the middleman who, is Skinny Pete. What is he going to do?
Because I'll go do it myself, right? It's just, I'm on probation.
But Jesse not wanting to take the L, he decides to make a run for it, but he doesn't even make it 10 steps before being yanked back by Gonzo and Nodos. And with Jesse once again sitting in front of Tuco, he's surprised to hear the offer of getting his money up front, even after what he just attempted. But he finds out that it was just too good to be true, and once the bag of money was extended to him, the moment he reaches for it, Jesse learns firsthand what Tuco is capable of when he's beaten within an inch of his life with a bag of money. And as Jesse is lying in a pool of his own blood, we find out the reason for this beating was because he decided to move Crystal in the South Valley, and he was only able to leave with his life because of the little respect that he had for Skinny Pete. Now, I don't know what he did to get Tuco's respect, but considering that they were locked up together, we can all make an educated guess. That's all I'm saying. But now, let's talk about his meeting with Walter, or better known as
Heisenberg.
Now on the surface, it starts out the same. A meeting is set, he brings Tuco drugs, and then he makes an offer. But where Jesse was timid and allowed for Tuco to control the meeting, Walter stood firm and didn't even blink at any attempt to be intimidated. And as Tuco was laying out the stupidity of this plan, Walter gave him a chemistry lesson that goes off with a bang. Now, ignoring the physics of how this piece of fulminated mercury was able to cause so much damage to the building, but Walter, who was the closest to the explosion, managed to stay standing, this was the perfect way to get Tuco's respect, which was basically threatening to kill everyone, including himself, just to make a point. Because above money or anything else, what the Salamancas respect the most is someone with balls.
You got balls. I'll give you that.
Se los dije. Tiene unos huevotes. I need to see you a boss.
Okay.
And from then on, a partnership was formed where Walter and Jesse have a new buyer, and as long as they have the drugs, they all have an understanding. But literally one meeting later, things almost go off the rails and they see how serious Tuco is about his business. Because when Walter was holding the bag of fulminated mercury, he told Tuco that he has to buy at least 2 pounds a week, something that they both agreed on. And now with his newfound respect for Walter, he trusted that he was a player in the game and he could deliver on his promise. But on the day of the meeting, they show up with less than half a pound, which is far from what they agreed upon. So feeling like his time was being wasted, he took a tax from the little money that he just gave them, and he expressed disappointment in believing that Walter was a player. And you can even see in real time how Tuco's respect for him goes down. But Walter wanting the money, as well as to prove that he can deliver, he tells Tuco to invest in him, which is kind of the reverse of what he proposed to Jesse.
What about the money?
You'll get it. This is a consignment operation.
You like this product, and you want more. Consider it a capital investment.
And maybe it was wishful thinking, but Tuco agreed. But he also warned Walter that he doesn't want to be someone that owes him money. And before leaving, he would give Walter the money, but he does so in the most degrading way possible by emptying the bag at his feet. Because although he does have a form of respect for Walter, with him failing to give Tuco what he wanted, he got a small sample of what his rage is like. And I can imagine how Jesse felt when he promised him 4 pounds by next week, knowing that they can barely make 2. I mean, look at this reaction. Just priceless. But luckily, Walter had a plan, and by the time of their next meeting, they had 4 pounds as agreed upon, and making Tuco the happiest that we would ever see him. But that smile quickly fades when his third in command decides that it's okay to speak up for the boss. And this was just unnecessary. I mean, even Tuco was like, really, bro?
Just remember who you're working for. What did you say?
And I'm not gonna lie, I was with Tuco in the first half with him checking no-dos, and when I first seen this, I thought he would have maybe hit him and told him to wait in the car or something. But when he just kept hitting him over and over and over and over, I think everyone watching had Walter's reaction when seeing that beating. But this would just go to show how Tuco measures respect, because no-dos has been with Tuco since day one, and even after all this time, it seemed that he was always on thin ice. But Walter, a man that he'd known for maybe a month, had 10 times the respect no-dos had. But why? Well, even though no-dos and Walter both work for Tuco, Walter established himself as someone that he'll need, and he earned his respect by showing absolute fearlessness. But for no-dos, he earned his by submission, which put him in a category where no matter what, he was always going to be an underling. And when he spoke out of term, Tuco took this as him trying to challenge the hierarchy, and he made sure that that will never happen again. But by the time he realized that he went too far, he now had a different problem on his hands. But it wasn't killing one of his own guys. It was the fact that he did it in front of people that he didn't know if he could trust. And we see how little he cared for no-dos when he tells Gonzo to get rid of the body. But when he merely suggests that this isn't right, Tuco doesn't even have to say a word to get him to comply. And as he drags the body under some old cars, Tuco gets face to face with Jesse and Walter and does a lie detector on them. And although Walter's seen the past, Jesse continues to be disrespected by being thrown to the ground before leaving Tuco in the junkyard. And as he watches them drive away, you see his mind working and wondering if he made a mistake by letting them go. But only 2 days later, he would correct that by kidnapping both Walter and Jesse and taking them out to the desert. And at this point, Tuco is in complete survival mode, because with him thinking that Gonzo was the one that snitched to the cops about no-dos, he chose to go across the border and back to Mexico, and the one thing that he takes with him is the man who can make him more drugs. I mean, priorities, right? But with Walter and Jesse not exactly thrilled about leaving town with someone like Tuco, together they devise a plan to poison him. And at the same time, they have to walk a tightrope where the line between respect and disrespect becomes razor thin. Because while inside the house, we see Tuco's drug use get more frequent, and on 3 separate occasions, we catch him snorting meth and showing that he's becoming more paranoid. And I have to mention this, the knife. I mean, we see him cooking and cutting meat, and he takes a small break to snort some meth off a knife, then he goes right back to cooking.
Don't you have standards? I mean, this place is disgusting.
But even though he kidnapped him, threatened to use Walter's family as collateral, and even nearly killed Jesse, Tuco still shows hospitality by feeding them. And although they did use this moment to poison his burrito, they would have succeeded if it wasn't for Hector. And this is where the real problems start. First by knocking the plate to the ground and unknowingly saving his nephew. And afterwards, he spends his time trying to get Tuco's attention. And when he does, even though it was Walter that tried to poison him, his first thought is assuming that it was Jesse. And this just lets us know that he had such high regard for Walter that the thought would never cross his mind that he would ever go against him. But this would be his downfall, because with him assuming that fear equals respect, he would never really know who's genuinely on his side. From Nacho, to no-dos, to Gonzo, and now Walter. And it would take a gun being pressed to the back of Jesse's head for the truth to finally come out. And as Walter admits what he was planning to do, it's almost like Tuco couldn't believe what he was hearing. And this information catches him off guard in such a way that it looked like he was trying to do the lie detector technique while turning to face Walter. But this did allow for Jesse to make his move and go on the attack. And throughout this little scuffle that they had, Tuco would end up with a bullet in his rib cage. And after being left to bleed out, that still wouldn't be enough to stop the unhinged Salamanca. And when making it back to Jesse's car, he gets an unexpected visitor in the form of Hank Schrader. And seeing the M16 in the driver's seat, Tuco makes a choice that he's not going back to jail, and he goes on a full assault trying to gun down Hank. But in the end, he would take a bullet to the head, and his reign of terror would be over. But that wasn't always the plan, because according to some behind the scenes interviews, there was plans to have Tuco in Breaking Bad all the way up into the end of season 2. But Raymond Cruz, the actor who played Tuco, had asked to be killed off due to him working on another show and finding the role to be mentally exhausting. Which is completely understandable, because 90% of his scenes are just him yelling at someone. And although he was only in 7 episodes between Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, Tuco made his mark as one of the most iconic villains in the series. And even though he was long dead, some of Tuco's words still echo throughout the seasons.
You're done.
You're done!
We're done. When I say we're done.
Hey everybody, and thank you for watching another video, and I hope you enjoyed my take on explaining Tuco Salamanca, who for me was definitely the character that got me to binge Breaking Bad. And if it weren't for Better Call Saul, he would have definitely been my favorite Salamanca, because it's just something about a character who is just unapologetically insane that makes things so much more interesting. And in the world of Breaking Bad with so many psychopaths already in it, he manages to stand apart from the rest. But that's just me. But now I want to hear from you guys. Who's your favorite Salamanca? Or better yet, who would win in a battle royale between them all? Whatever it is, let me know down below in the comments and I'll do my best to respond. Until then, my name is Murge. Later.